I was sipping my morning espresso at a Dallas hotel when my mom texted, "Family shares the burden. I fixed your sister's problem." 1 second later, my phone tracker pinged. My Mercedes AMG GT Coupe was leaving my Austin garage at 60 miles per hour. She expected tears or helpless screaming. Instead, I smiled, set down my cup, and tapped the first command to completely destroy her life before midnight. Hello to the wonderful audience of Haley Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has entirely demonetized our channel, leaving us without an operating budget to keep bringing you these deep dives into family drama. If you find value in today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so our team can pay their living expenses and keep creating high-quality content. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comment below. Now, let us step into the story. I am Aurora Boyd, and this is my reality. At 34 years old, I stand as the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Lumina Heights Design, a premier architectural firm I built from absolute scratch through years of relentless sacrifice and sleepless nights. My life is a testament to discipline and unwavering focus. I reside independently in a custom-engineered smart mansion nestled within the exclusive quiet enclave of Tarrytown in Austin. Every single corner of my home, from the automated climate control systems to the minimalist geometric furniture, reflects my core philosophy: order, logic, and unbreakable boundaries. I have spent my entire adult life meticulously constructing this fortress of success to distance myself from the chaotic, suffocating quicksand of my upbringing. Yet, as I have painfully learned, toxic roots are incredibly stubborn and deeply invasive. The pristine, controlled silence of my Tuesday evening was violently ruptured when my mother, Margaret, and my 29-year-old sister, Chloe, barged into my living room. They did not ring the bell. They simply bypassed the outer gate code they had memorized and pushed their way inside, bringing with them a frantic, demanding energy that instantly stained the peaceful atmosphere of my home. Chloe threw herself onto my imported white leather sofa, burying her face in her hands in a theatrical performance of utter despair, while Margaret paced aggressively across my polished hardwood floors, with the entitlement of someone who firmly believed she owned the very ground I walked on. I stood silently behind my cold marble kitchen island, observing their chaotic display with the detached, analytical eye I usually reserve for spotting structural flaws in building blueprints. Margaret finally stopped her manic pacing and glared at me, her eyes wild with a manufactured emergency. The story she spat out was a pathetic, highly predictable disaster. Chloe had somehow managed to completely vaporize $50,000. According to my mother's frantic explanation, my sister had been lured into a highly suspicious, underground cryptocurrency investment scheme by a charismatic stranger she met on the internet. When the initial funds vanished into the digital void, rather than accepting her foolish loss and moving on, Chloe made the catastrophic decision to double down on her mistake. She sought out a predatory, off-the-books loan syndicate to gamble her way back to the top. Naturally, lacking any real financial literacy, she lost every single cent of that borrowed money as well. Now these dangerous, faceless lenders were breathing down her neck, promising severe and physical consequences if the massive debt was not settled in full by the end of the month. Margaret marched over and planted both of her hands firmly on my kitchen counter, leaning in close to my personal space. She did not ask for a favor. She issued a desperate executive order. She demanded that I immediately liquidate a portion of my investment portfolio to wipe out Chloe's massive debt. "You have more money than you could ever spend in a lifetime, Aurora," Margaret declared, her tone dripping with a toxic resentment that thinly masqueraded as maternal authority. "She is your sister. Blood sisters must save each other. Family shares the burden, and you owe it to us to fix this right now." I took a slow, measured sip of my sparkling water, feeling the cool liquid slide down my throat. I felt absolutely no panic, only a deep, exhausting, and profound disappointment. I set my glass down precisely on a coaster, looked directly into my mother's demanding eyes, and delivered a singular, uncompromising word: no. The syllable hung in the air, heavy and razor sharp. Chloe's fake, exaggerated sobbing hitched in her throat, and Margaret's jaw literally dropped in disbelief. Before my mother could launch her practiced emotional artillery and begin the usual guilt trip, I raised my right hand, cutting her off completely. "I am not doing this anymore, Mother," I stated, my voice as cold and smooth as the marble beneath my fingertips. Let us accurately review the history of my so-called familial duty. 5 years ago, I paid off her $10,000 credit card debt when she maxed it out trying to become a luxury lifestyle influencer. 3 years ago, I covered the massive penalty for her broken lease when she abandoned her apartment on a whim to follow a jobless boyfriend to another state. 2 years ago, I sank exactly $25,000 into bailing out her completely failed cosmetic startup. And exactly 1 year ago, I paid the exorbitant legal retainers to keep her out of a jail cell after that reckless driving incident. That is 4 distinct, expensive times I have acted as the financial janitor for Chloe's reckless impulsiveness. I leaned forward, slightly mirroring her aggressive posture, but entirely dominating the space between us. The Bank of Aurora is permanently closed. I will not enable her sheer incompetence for a 5th time. This boundary is set in stone, and it will not be crossed again under any circumstances. You two need to leave my house immediately. Margaret's expression rapidly twisted from genuine shock into a terrifying mask of pure, unadulterated venom. The fragile maternal facade melted away entirely, revealing the bitter, resentful woman beneath. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at my chest. "You are a cold-blooded, ungrateful wretch," she hissed, her voice shaking with intense rage. "You sit up here in your pristine glass castle, judging your own flesh and blood as if you are some kind of god. You think you are completely untouchable just because you have a little bit of money and a fancy title. You will deeply regret turning your back on your own family, Aurora. Mark my words carefully. I will make sure you pay for this sickening arrogance." She grabbed Chloe roughly by the arm, violently hauling her off my pristine sofa, and dragged her out of my living room. The heavy solid wood front door slammed shut behind them with a deafening crack, echoing ominously through the empty, high-ceilinged halls of my mansion. I took a long, deep breath, finally clearing their toxic, chaotic residue from my lungs. I mistakenly believed that setting a rigid, immovable boundary would force them to finally face reality and take accountability. I assumed the conflict was officially over. By the end of the week, I had efficiently compartmentalized the ugly incident, pushing it entirely out of my mind. That weekend, I meticulously packed my bags for a crucial architectural executive summit. I ordered a private black car to transport me to the airport and flew out to Dallas, leaving my prized Mercedes-AMG GT Coupe securely locked inside my private garage. I had absolutely no idea that my logical, justified refusal had just triggered a calculated, devastating betrayal that would change everything. I stepped out of the glass-walled conference room on the 15th floor, leaving the noise of the executive summit entirely behind me. The air conditioning in the hotel hallway was freezing, but my mind was completely focused and razor-sharp. Most people subjected to a grand theft auto orchestrated by their own mother would immediately call her to scream, cry, or hurl desperate insults. That is exactly what Margaret expected. She wanted a dramatic, tearful confrontation where she could play the righteous matriarch, taking back what was owed to the family. I refused to give her that satisfaction. Instead of making a useless phone call, I opened my centralized home management application. My fingers moved swiftly over the screen. I tapped directly into the live feed of my private garage. The screen displayed nothing but static. It was a thick, unbroken wall of gray noise. I switched to the perimeter cameras covering the driveway and the front gates. I scrubbed backward through the recorded timeline. Everything was crystal clear until exactly 9:15 in the morning. At that precise minute, a localized 5-minute blackout hit the exact zone covering the garage entrance. This was not a fortunate software glitch. That was a targeted, deliberate signal jammer. My mother is a woman who still struggles to operate a standard smart television remote. She absolutely did not execute a military-grade signal interference operation on her own. She had secured highly professional, dangerous help. I immediately dialed the head of security for my elite gated community. The phone rang barely twice before Marcus, the daytime supervisor, answered. I bypassed all pleasantries. Marcus, my garage was just breached. Tell me exactly who authorized a vehicle removal from my property this morning. His voice carried a heavy mix of confusion and immediate defensiveness. Ms. Boyd, there was absolutely no breach triggered on our end. A licensed transport company arrived at the main gate at exactly 9:20. They brought a specialized flatbed tow truck. The driver presented a fully executed digital transfer of title and a notarized proxy authorization. The paperwork contained your verified electronic signature and your personal tax identification number. Everything scanned perfectly green in our legal database. We followed standard protocol and logged it as a fully authorized vehicle transport. I ended the call without another word. Legal documents, verified electronic signatures, tax identification numbers. The reality of the situation rapidly crystallized in my mind. They did not smash a window, and they did not hotwire the engine. They stole my $200,000 vehicle using the deadliest weapon in the modern world, paperwork. Panic is a useless, destructive emotion. It severely clouds logical judgment and wastes incredibly precious time. I locked my emotions into a tight mental box and activated a full-scale crisis management protocol. If these thieves possessed my verified electronic signature and my tax identification number, they had complete, unrestricted access to my primary digital identity. The stolen vehicle was just a visible symptom. The actual disease was a catastrophic, systemic security breach. I leaned against the cold wall and dialed the chief legal counsel for Lumina Heights Design. David, drop whatever you are currently working on, I ordered the second he picked up. I am facing a severe high-level identity compromise. I need you to initiate an absolute, ironclad freeze on all my personal bank accounts and my corporate investment portfolios. Contact the 3 major credit bureaus immediately. Put a hard lock on my social security number and my personal tax identification. Nobody's allowed to move a single dime or approve any contract unless I authorize it verbally with our internal emergency code. Understood, Aurora, David replied with absolute professional calm. Do you want me to dispatch local law enforcement to your residence? Not yet, I replied sharply. I need to clearly see the exact shape of the knife in my back before I invite the police into the crime scene. I hung up the phone. The sheer audacity of the betrayal washed over me. The enemy had not just knocked on my front door. They had silently slithered through the invisible wires of my digital life. I opened my airline booking application. I permanently canceled my return flight scheduled for Sunday evening. Within 30 seconds, I booked a first-class seat on the very next plane leaving Dallas for Austin, departing at 1:45 in the afternoon. I walked back into the conference room, quietly packed my leather briefcase, and instructed my vice president to take over the remaining presentations. By 2 o'clock, I was thousands of feet in the air, staring coldly out the airplane window at the sprawling Texas landscape below. I began mentally mapping out my home network, hunting for the single fatal security flaw I had somehow overlooked. The hunt had officially begun. The silence of my house felt entirely different when I unlocked the front door that afternoon. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a compromised crime scene. I bypassed the living room and walked straight down the hallway into my private reading room. Behind a heavy oak bookshelf, recessed into the wall, sat my secondary biometric safe. The digital display on the panel was completely dark, but the tiny indicator light blinked a steady, mocking yellow. It was unlocked. I pulled the heavy steel door open. My backup passport was gone. More importantly, my certified physical tax returns from the previous 3 years were missing. I checked the internal access log on the keypad interface. The safe had not been drilled or hacked. It was opened using a manual 6-digit bypass code. It was a sequence of numbers I had written down on a piece of paper exactly 5 years ago and handed to my mother to keep in her bank deposit box, meant only for a life-or-death medical emergency. She had kept that weapon in her pocket for half a decade, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I did not touch the empty shelves. I turned around, walked into my home office, and booted up my encrypted primary terminal. I bypassed my corporate IT department entirely and directly called Elias. He is an independent, top-tier private cybersecurity investigator who previously ran penetration testing for government defense contractors, and I keep him on a very expensive, very quiet retainer. I authorized his remote access into my local home network architecture, instructing him to pull every single byte of Wi-Fi routing data from Tuesday evening. For 2 unbroken hours, I sat in the dark, watching lines of code and data packets cascade down my monitor while Elias worked the logs. We were hunting for ghosts. Finally, Elias isolated a rogue media access control address that had successfully piggybacked onto my hidden guest network. It belonged to Chloe's personal laptop. "They did not just sit in your living room and cry, Aurora." Elias's voice crackled over the encrypted audio link. "They were actively transmitting data while your mother was distracting you. I am tracking the packet destination right now." The digital trail was chillingly meticulous. Margaret had not sold my vehicle to a legitimate luxury dealership or a standard broker. Elias unmasked the routing protocol, revealing that the digital bill of sale had been transmitted to a secure dark web adjacent portal. The registered receiver of the asset transfer was a man named Marcus. The pieces of the puzzle aggressively snapped together in my mind. Marcus was not a car dealer. He was the exact underground syndicate loan shark Chloe owed her $50,000 debt to. Furthermore, a quick cross-reference through Elias's background databases revealed that Marcus operated a highly lucrative, entirely illegal black market export ring, specializing in smuggling stolen supercars out of Texas and into overseas shipping containers. The sheer venomous brilliance of my mother's plan left me momentarily breathless. Margaret had stolen my physical tax records to completely bypass the 2-factor identity authentication on the State Transportation Registry portal. With my Social Security number and my financial history in her hands, she had created a flawless, untraceable burner email account using my exact full name and birth year. From there, she generated a legally binding electronic contract. She transferred the title of my vehicle directly to Marcus as a total liquidation of Chloe's debt. This was not a simple theft. My mother had not just stolen a car. By deliberately signing my verified identity onto a transfer document with a known black market smuggler, she had legally framed me. If federal agents ever raided Marcus's operation and seized those documents, my name would be the one permanently stamped on the illicit paperwork. I would be indicted as the primary supplier for an international fencing ring. Margaret was entirely willing to sacrifice my freedom, my unblemished corporate reputation, and my entire future just to erase her youngest daughter's foolish mistakes. I have the compiled Internet Protocol logs, the fake email headers, and a downloaded copy of the counterfeit digital contract, Elias stated quietly, fully grasping the severity of the situation. "This is felony-level identity theft and wire fraud. Do you want me to package this evidence and securely forward it to the cyber division of the local authorities?" I stared at the glowing blue light of the monitor. Calling the police right now would be a massive strategic error. It would initiate a messy, painfully slow legal battle where Margaret would undoubtedly hire a lawyer, cry in the courtroom, and play the pathetic, technologically illiterate mother who just made a desperate mistake for her child. I did not want a drawn-out negotiation. I wanted absolute, undeniable destruction. "No, Elias," I replied, my voice perfectly steady. "Do not contact the authorities. Secure the logs and leave the tracking programs running in the background. They think they are the hunters, but they just handed me the keys to their own execution." I severed the connection and leaned back in my leather chair. My mother wanted to play a high-stakes game of digital deception. I was going to build a flawless cage, and I would make sure she smiled the entire time she walked into it. I picked up my phone, staring at the blank group chat containing my mother and sister. "If you want to catch a greedy animal, you do not chase it into the woods. You lay a trap, fill it with their favorite bait, and pretend to look the exact opposite way." My fingers moved rapidly across the screen, composing a message dripping with manufactured defeat. "Mom, Chloe, I see the transfer records. You win. I am completely devastated and broken by this, but I do not have the energy to fight my own family in a courtroom. I am letting the vehicle go. All I ask is that you keep this entirely between us. Please do not tell anyone about this situation. I just need time to process everything and heal in peace." I pressed send and placed the phone face down on the desk. It took exactly 4 minutes for the response to arrive. Margaret texted back, "I am glad you finally understand what truly matters, Aurora. Family is everything. We forgive your earlier selfishness." I let out a harsh, quiet laugh. To fully appreciate my mother's delusion, I opened a separate browser tab and navigated to her public Facebook profile. Right at the top of her feed, posted mere minutes after my fake surrender, was a melodramatic status update. It read, "Nothing in this world is more powerful than a mother's love. Today we proved that family loyalty always triumphs over cold, meaningless material possessions. Feeling blessed and victorious." Her sisters and friends were already leaving heart emojis in the comments. The sheer, suffocating arrogance of it all was almost poetic. She genuinely believed she had beaten me into total submission. Behind my manufactured silence, the real game was already in motion. I closed the social media tab and brought my tracking software to the forefront of my main monitor. On the day I purchased that vehicle, I did not just rely on the factory-installed security systems. Those are the first things professional thieves disable. Before I even drove it off the lot, I paid an independent security contractor to slice open the stitching of the passenger seat and embed a military-grade, battery-independent tracking device deep inside the high-density foam cushion. It was completely invisible, practically undetectable by standard sweepers, and directly linked to an encrypted satellite network. A bright, pulsing red dot dominated the dark gray map on my screen. I watched its trajectory with a cold, absolute focus. The vehicle was not sitting in a local chop shop being stripped down for parts. The red dot had traveled steadily southeast down Interstate 10 and was currently completely stationary at a massive commercial shipping port on the desolate outskirts of Houston. I zoomed in on the exact satellite coordinates. It was parked inside a heavy industrial warehouse right next to the deep water docks. The strategy was glaringly obvious. Marcus was holding it there, waiting for the perfect moment to load my property into a secure steel shipping container, destined to be smuggled out across the ocean to a buyer in the Middle East. Knowing the location was only half the battle. I needed the undeniable legal chain of evidence directly connecting Chloe's device to the syndicate's extortion. The digital contract was not enough. I needed their private conversations. I needed to weaponize their own greed against them. I opened my encrypted email client and drafted a new message, addressing it directly to Chloe. The subject line was explicitly designed to be irresistible. Emergency fund transfer $50,000. In the body of the email, I wrote a brief, pathetic note. "Chloe, I feel terrible about how we left things. I am sending you the original cash from my reserve fund so you can start completely fresh. Click the secure portal link below to authorize the direct deposit. The link, naturally, had absolutely nothing to do with a bank. It was a customized, highly aggressive Trojan payload that Elias had engineered specifically for this exact moment. It contained a hidden tracking pixel and an automated mirroring script. I clicked send and leaned back in my leather chair, watching the real-time access logs. My sister had just stolen a car worth 4 times that amount, but I knew the deep-rooted psychology of a degenerate gambler. She would never, under any circumstances, leave free money on the table. 7 minutes passed. The silence in my office was incredibly heavy. Then, the access log flashed a brilliant, violent green. Chloe had taken the bait. She opened the email. More importantly, she clicked the link using the exact same laptop she had utilized to communicate with the underground lenders. The hidden script executed flawlessly, bypassing her primitive local firewall in a matter of seconds. My secondary monitor instantly flooded with incoming data packets. The script was actively cloning the hidden cache of her encrypted desktop messaging application. I opened the mirrored files and began reading the raw, unedited history of their extortion. Line after line of brutal, terrifying threats from Marcus. Have the $50,000 by midnight Friday, or I will send my guys to permanently break your legs. Following that, the desperate, groveling replies from Chloe. And finally, the ultimate piece of evidence from Marcus. Receive the digital title from your mother. Car is at the Houston docks. If it clears customs without a hitch, your debt is officially wiped clean. I slowly highlighted the entire conversation thread and hit the secure save button. Every single lie, every stolen document, and every illegal threat was now fully documented and securely locked in my possession. The mouse had blindly walked into the center of the maze, completely unaware that the steel doors had just locked securely from the outside. The atmosphere inside the Houston dockside warehouse shifted from confident anticipation to absolute paranoia in a matter of seconds. Marcus was an arrogant smuggler, but he was not an amateur. Before loading any high-value vehicle into an international shipping container, his crew routinely swept the immediate area with commercial radio frequency detectors. The handheld scanner in his mechanic's grip suddenly screamed, picking up a faint, encrypted satellite pulse completely distinct from the factory security systems they had already disabled. Marcus stared at the pulsing scanner, his mind instantly racing to the worst possible conclusion. He assumed the completely clean digital title was a Trojan horse. He believed Margaret had intentionally handed him a tracked vehicle to set him up for a federal bust, planning to wipe her daughter's debt and collect a massive informant bounty simultaneously. Blinded by sheer fury and a desperate need to maintain control, Marcus pulled out his untraceable burner phone and dialed Margaret's number. Back in Austin, my mother was likely still basking in the glow of her social media victory when her screen lit up. "You incredibly stupid, miserable old woman," Marcus roared into the receiver the second she answered, his voice a violent, razor-sharp hiss. "Did you really think you could play a game with my operation? My sweepers just found an active military tracker screaming from the car you sold me. You set a trap." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Margaret stammered, the color instantly draining from her face as the reality of her associate collapsed around her. "I swear on my life the car is clean. The paperwork is real." "The paperwork is a death sentence if the police follow that signal to my front door," Marcus interrupted, his rage echoing through the cavernous warehouse. "The deal is entirely canceled. You have exactly until midnight tonight to bring $50,000 in unmarked cash to my location. If I do not have that money in my hands by the deadline, I will personally drive this vehicle off the Deepwater Pier into the Gulf of Mexico, and right after it sinks, I am sending a crew of very angry men to your house to break every single bone in your body. Do not test me." He severed the connection, leaving Margaret suffocating in a vacuum of pure, absolute terror. The house of cards she had built on my stolen identity was violently crumbling. She had no liquid assets, no credit, and absolutely no way to procure $50,000 in a matter of hours. The only remaining option was the very daughter she had just betrayed and mocked. My phone began vibrating violently against the polished wood of my desk. The caller identification displayed my mother's name. I let it ring 3 full times to let her panic steep, then calmly pressed the accept button. "Aurora, please, you have to help us," Margaret wailed, her voice a frantic, hyperventilating mess. The arrogant matriarch from this morning was completely gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. She launched into a wildly fabricated, hysterical narrative. "It is Chloe. The men she owes money to, they found her. They snatched her right off the street. They are holding her hostage in a terrible place. They told me if we do not bring $50,000 in cash tonight, they are going to kill her. You are the only one who can save her, Aurora. Please, I am begging you on my hands and knees." I listened to her elaborate, pathetic lie without interrupting. I knew exactly where Chloe was. According to the encrypted chat log sitting safely on my hard drive, my sister was currently hiding out in Margaret's guest bedroom, completely safe, frantically trying to figure out why her laptop was running incredibly slow. But exposing the lie right now would ruin the grand finale. "Calm down, Mother," I replied, injecting my voice with a perfect blend of manufactured anxiety and resolute determination. "I am not going to let anyone hurt my sister. I will go to the bank, authorize an emergency cash withdrawal from my vault, and pack the briefcase. Give me the exact address where they are holding her. I am coming to save the family." Margaret sobbed with profound, entirely misplaced relief and quickly rattled off the exact coordinates of the Houston warehouse. "Hurry, Aurora. Please hurry." "I will be there exactly when I need to be," I promised softly. I ended the call and let a cold, genuine smile spread across my face. The final piece of the trap had just locked into position. I opened a direct, secure communication channel with the Texas Interstate Crime Task Force. I did not call a standard emergency dispatcher. I contacted a specific senior federal investigator I knew through my corporate legal dealings. I attached the complete, devastating package: the forged electronic title, the captured extortion chat logs, the precise geolocation of the warehouse, and the undeniable proof of international smuggling preparations. "My stolen vehicle is currently being prepped for illicit export at these exact coordinates," I typed in the accompanying message. "The primary ringleader is armed and highly volatile. Proceed with extreme tactical caution." I closed my laptop and grabbed a set of keys from the front hallway table. My own car was currently sitting in a hostile dockyard, so I had secured a sleek, unobtrusive black rental sedan earlier that afternoon. I walked out of my house, slid into the driver's seat, and merged onto the highway. The sky above Austin was darkening, heavy with the promise of a violent storm. I set the cruise control, driving steadily toward Houston, entirely relaxed, ready to watch my enemies drown in the flood they had created. The heavy, humid air of the Houston shipping channel smelled strongly of industrial diesel and stagnant salt water. Inside the cavernous, dimly lit warehouse, the tension was thick enough to choke on. I parked my black rental sedan in the shadows just outside the massive corrugated steel doors, leaving the engine running silently. Through the cracked opening, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the final act. My stolen Mercedes sat under a single flickering halogen bulb, looking completely out of place on the oil-stained concrete floor. Standing near the front bumper were Margaret and Chloe. They looked absolutely pathetic. The glamorous, arrogant facade they had worn just a few days ago was completely gone, replaced by the shivering, hollow-eyed reality of cornered criminals. Marcus paced violently back and forth in front of them, his heavy boots echoing off the metal walls. He was a tightly coiled spring of rage, checking his heavy gold watch every few seconds. They were all waiting for the foolish, compliant, and deeply loyal daughter to arrive with a briefcase full of salvation. They genuinely believed I was rushing through the night, terrified for my sister's life, ready to hand over $50,000 in untraceable cash to fix their catastrophic mess. I shifted the car into drive and slowly pressed the accelerator. The rental sedan rolled forward, its bright LED headlights instantly cutting through the dark warehouse and illuminating the three of them like actors on a stage. Marcus stopped pacing, shielding his eyes from the glare. Margaret let out a loud, dramatic gasp of relief, instantly grabbing Chloe's arm. I engaged the parking brake. The screech of the tires echoed sharply. I opened the door and stepped out into the humid air. I was wearing a tailored charcoal business suit, my hair perfectly swept back. I left the door open, casually leaning my lower back against the doorframe, crossing my arms over my chest. I looked at them with the calm, detached pity of a superior observing an incredibly foolish experiment. My hands were completely empty. There was no duffel bag. There was no aluminum briefcase. There was absolutely nothing. "Where is the money, Aurora?" Margaret shrieked, her voice cracking with sheer panic as her eyes frantically scanned my empty hands and the empty seats of the car behind me. "He is going to kill us. Give him the cash right now." Marcus took 2 heavy steps toward me, his face twisting into a mask of pure, violent fury. "You think this is a joke, lady? You think you can drive into my port empty-handed? You just signed a death warrant for your entire family." He reached aggressively into the inside pocket of his leather jacket, his fingers wrapping around the heavy steel grip of a concealed weapon. He never even got the chance to pull it out. The deafening, high-pitched wail of federal sirens suddenly tore through the silence of the night, echoing from every single direction at once. The entire perimeter of the warehouse exploded into blinding, disorienting chaos. The massive steel doors at the back of the building were violently rammed open by a heavy armored vehicle. Specialized tactical units from the Texas Interstate Crime Task Force breached from all 4 sides simultaneously. Dozens of heavily armed operators swarmed the concrete floor, their combat boots pounding in perfect unison, cutting through the darkness with heavy-duty, weapon-mounted strobe lights. "Federal agents, drop your weapons. Get on the ground right now." The commands were absolute and terrifyingly loud. The entire syndicate was completely neutralized in under 60 seconds. Marcus froze, the blinding white lights hitting him directly in the face. A tactical officer slammed him forcefully against the hood of a nearby forklift, kicking his legs apart and violently clicking heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. Margaret and Chloe screamed, huddling together in terror as the armed agents secured the building. When the immediate threat was neutralized and the dust began to settle, my mother slowly opened her eyes. She saw Marcus being dragged away, aggressively fighting the officers as they read him his federal charges for armed transnational property smuggling. Margaret let out a massive, shuddering breath of relief. She mistakenly believed the cavalry had arrived to rescue her. She actually tried to run toward the lead investigator, putting on her best victim face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, thank God you are here, officer," Margaret cried out, reaching out her trembling hands. "That horrible man kidnapped my daughter. We have been so terrified." The lead investigator, a tall man with a hardened face whom I had briefed extensively just hours ago, did not offer her a blanket or a reassuring smile. He stepped forward, completely ignoring her outstretched hands, and signaled to 2 female officers behind him. "Margaret Boyd and Chloe Boyd," the investigator stated, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You are both under arrest." My mother stopped dead in her tracks, her mouth hanging open in complete, uncomprehending shock. The 2 officers moved in swiftly, grabbing their arms and spinning them around. "Wait, what are you doing?" Chloe screamed, fighting against the officer's grip as the cold metal cuffs snapped tightly shut around her wrists. "We are the victims here. He was going to kill us." "You are being formally charged with acting as primary accomplices to transnational smuggling, aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, and massive digital contract fraud," the investigator read out loudly, ensuring every word echoed off the warehouse walls. "You have the right to remain silent." The reality of the situation finally shattered Margaret's delusion. She realized she had not been rescued. She had been hunted. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed heavily onto the hard concrete floor, dragging the officer down with her. She turned her head, her wild, terrified eyes locking onto me. I was still leaning against my car, perfectly still, watching the entire scene unfold with absolute coldness. "Aurora!" Margaret wailed, her voice a horrifying mixture of betrayal and desperate pleading. "Aurora, please, tell them. Tell them this is just a family misunderstanding. Tell them we did not mean it. You cannot let them take your mother to prison. Please." I slowly pushed myself off the car and walked toward her. My heels clicked rhythmically against the concrete. I stopped just 2 feet away from where she was kneeling in the dirt. I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket and pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder. It contained perfectly printed copies of every single digital footprint they had left behind. The forged electronic signatures, the captured Internet Protocol addresses from Chloe's laptop, the completely unedited extortion chat logs, and her sickeningly arrogant social media posts. I dropped the heavy folder. It landed with a dull thud right on the concrete by her knees. I leaned down slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear the absolute finality in my words. "Consequences, Mother. This is not a sacrifice. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a consequence." I stood back up and turned around, completely ignoring Chloe's hysterical screaming as the officers roughly hauled them both to their feet and dragged them toward the waiting armored transport vans. I watched the heavy steel doors of the police vehicles slam shut, securely locking away the toxic anchors that had tried to drag me down to the bottom of the ocean. The lead investigator walked over to me. He held out his hand, dropping the keys to my Mercedes directly into my palm. He gave me a single, respectful nod before turning back to manage the massive crime scene. I unlocked the coupe. The familiar, comforting sound of the heavy door unlocking felt like the final closing note of a long, exhausting symphony. I slid into the premium leather driver's seat, pressing the ignition button. The massive 8-cylinder engine roared to life, its deep growl echoing proudly. I shifted the car into gear and drove out of the dark warehouse, pulling onto the empty highway beneath the yellow glow of the streetlights. I drove back toward Austin, surrounded by the absolute, unbroken silence of the night. I left the people who had exploited our shared bloodline completely behind in the ruins of their own making. There was no more guilt. There was no more financial debt. There were no more forced concessions to a broken family dynamic. There was only the open road, my absolute freedom, and the beautiful, ruthless law of reality. You reap exactly what you sow. To our amazing audience, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Your presence means the world to us. Please let us know down in the comments where you are currently listening from. If you enjoyed this story and found it satisfying, we humbly ask for your help. Because YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, we rely entirely on your kindness. If you can, please consider supporting us with just $1. You can scan the PayPal QR code currently on your screen, or use the direct PayPal link provided in the description and the pinned comment. Your $1 directly pays the salaries of our hardworking team, allowing them to feed their families and continue creating these incredible stories for you. Thank you for your unbelievable support, and stay safe out there.